Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us, whether you're watching live. Now, this is it's a while since we did a live episode, but over the summer we've been recording, and many of you have been engaged in the conversations that we've had. Thank you for being here today. I think this is our 50th episode, and we've got a brilliant episode for you today. I'll come to that in a second. But again, thank you for being here with the Smart Curriculum Network. So many things going on. We are looking towards the new year and making some changes over the things that we're doing. But Smart Curriculum Network and Friday Focus will remain here with our 2 weekly broadcast. So thank you for joining us, and please get involved in the conversation. We say that often. This is about a conversation about education and education matters. And please join the conversation. So if you're on LinkedIn or you're on YouTube and you're seeing the screen, please just leave a comment, even just say hi. And it would be really valuable if you would like, share and subscribe, because then others can see and more impact come from the conversations that we are having. So please do like, share and subscribe. But let's get into the conversation of this morning. Now, I get around the country and I see a number of things. I was invited to the Society of Authors, and I went on a Friday afternoon, I believe, to see what was there and get involved. And you know that of the Smart Curriculum is looking to publish a number of books on what we do. We've already published The Efficient School. I'm working on the Perfect Timetable at the moment, and there are some others already in the plan. But I went because it's all about learning, and it's great to hear. And while I was there, I met or I saw a number of speakers, of which my guest this morning was one of those speakers. So Marcelo Starikoff, I welcome you to the Friday Focus conversation. Thank you for being here. I introduce you by name, but I'm going to leave you to introduce what you do and where you are, and we'll get into the conversation about what you're doing. Marcelo.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's such an honor, such a privilege to be on the Friday conversation with you today. I'm really looking forward to our chat, and also really looking forward to the views, comments, ideas that emerge from today from all the listeners. It's a fantastic opportunity to throw open lots of provocations, I would say, in terms of looking at education in a really exciting way. So I'm really, really excited to be here, Chris, and so wonderful that we met at the Author Society. It's really made a huge difference to now coming across a Smart Curriculum and to all the things that are happening as a result. So I'm really, really pleased. Shall I give you
Tell us about you.
A little bit about me. So I'm Marcelo Starikoff, and a little brief sort of history of my life up till now.
Yes.
It's really interesting because there's actually so many parts of sort of my life up until now actually shape the whole philosophy of education that is now known as the joy of not knowing. You know, I can really see, looking back at various moments that have been important in forming the various aspects of that philosophy. So I was born in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and lived there till I was 11. And then in 1976, we came over with my parents and my brother to London. And without speaking a word of English, I joined secondary school, amazingly wonderful secondary school in North London in Crouch End, Highgate Wood School. And we initially just meant to be here for a year, but then it turned into a lifetime. So we've never sort of been back. So after doing the secondary school, and I stayed there for the sixth one, which was fabulous. I then, really interestingly, did my first degree at the University of Sussex, where I am now. And I did a degree called Environmental Science, which was the first year was being it was being launched. So we were the launch year 1984, which was really interesting if you think, 40 years ago, how forward-looking Sussex was in terms of that degree was absolutely fantastic. And I loved it because it was a very interdisciplinary degree. So we were doing lots with geography, with biology, with chemistry, and it was absolutely fabulous. And then after that, I worked for a year at the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, which is sort of related to the degree. And then I engaged in a career as a scientist. So I did a PhD at the London Hospital in Whitechapel. And I was looking at how lactic acid goes in and out of our liver cells. When your muscles hurt, that's lactic acid going in. Which is really, really interesting. And I loved being in that sort of hospital environment and medicine. And that's where I met Anna, my wife, who was training as a doctor. And that, following the PhD, I got a postdoc position in Bristol. So Anna and I moved to Bristol. And then I switched to looking at red blood cells and how red blood cells function, and particularly how red blood cells have to squeeze themselves into an eighth of their shape and then come back to normal shape when they go through very tiny capillaries in our bodies. And I was looking at when that goes wrong. And I did sort of 5-6 years of postdoc research in Bristol. And then it was around the time that Emily was born, our first one was born, I decided that pure scientific academic research wasn't quite right for a whole future for myself. So I took the decision to retrain, to do a PGCE in primary education at the University of West of England in Bristol. And it's the best thing I've ever done, Chris. It was just from the first moment. I loved it so much, and then was incredibly lucky to land in both my final year practice school, Hotwas, which is absolutely amazing, and then my first 2 schools in Bristol. I don't know if you know Bristol really well, but
a little, not I'm on the other side of the country, but yes,
Christchurch Primary was my first one as an NQT, and then Westbury Park, and it was so formative in my life, those 2 schools, because it was at a stage, it was early 2000s, 1999, 2000, where there seemed to be a culture in schools or in education across the country where we were excited to take risks, to experiment, to look at education in a really, really exciting way, to collaborate, to use. I remember working, I met so many people, from Steve Williams to Robert Fisher to, Will Lord, so it was just really, really fascinating. And I became very interested in the whole world of thinking skills, of philosophy for children, of lifelong learning. We did a huge study with Guy Claxton at the time and Ruth Dickin-Crick in Bristol, where we developed a set of lifelong learning dispositions in primary schools, which now many schools use, the ones that are linked to animals, so the resilient tortoise and so on. So it was at a time when experimentation and trying things out was absolutely the mode, as it were. And I was very lucky that both my head teachers were very, very keen on doing that. But what was really keen is that both heads, Tony and Ellen, at both schools had a very similar philosophy, in that what they wanted to do with primary education was to take the wonders of early years practice and the EYFS further up the school. So that's what then became, or with the joy of not knowing now, is what I refer to intellectual playfulness. So where you present the learning in a way that's really, really playful, interesting, based on curiosity and questioning, on not knowing, and setting up the scenes for that sort of experimentation in the classroom, very similar to the YFS, but across all ages. And I then took the opportunity to go into senior leadership when, just by chance, we moved back to Brighton when my wife got a job here as a doctor. She got her first consultant's post. We moved back to Brighton just completely by chance. I went into senior leadership, and that was so interesting, Chris, because I landed in a school called St. Bart's as my first deputy headship position, and I was then for the first time able to transmit all the thoughts and theories and things that I had been developing as a teacher more into the sort of life of the whole school. And then that was completed when I then got my first headship, which is where all the magic happened. Hertford Infants in Primary School was so wonderful to get that first position as a head, and to really instill that sort of culture across the school, all based on values, creative thinking, critical thinking, love of not knowing, embracing uncertainty, lifelong learning, all those sorts of things, but right across the whole structure of the school. I was then head of another big primary school, Balfour Primary, and then I took the opportunity between headship and the university role that I'm in now to write the book. So I thought there were just so many magical moments throughout my life, and I've been writing lots of articles along the way, and I just thought it'd be so amazing to just put all those ideas together in terms of framing how whole school leadership can lead to such magical moments, not just with the children, but also with the teachers. That exciting the teachers to really love what they're doing on a daily basis, and to give them that professional freedom to experiment, as I had when I was young, was really fascinating. And the reason why it became known, the phraseology which grew out of the work at Hertford Infants, is based on the fact that I realized that all those magic moments actually happened when we were removing the worry of learning, or the worry of not knowing, from the children. So the whole idea, which we'll talk in detail and describe, is based on removing the fear, removing the worry, and replacing that with an enthusiasm and an excitement and an intrinsic motivation to want to know. So the idea of phrasing of the joy of not knowing is not that it's implying that it's really good in terms of ignorance to not know, but what it's really trying to transmit is that in order to learn something new, we have to not know it first. So then that's from that stem, when you give children that freedom to say, when you say to them that it's brilliant that you don't know, it's completely transformational for their lives, because it makes so much sense that if we are going to learn something new, we have to not know it in the first place. So placing that at the center of the day, of the educational process, of the culture in which they are feeling that they're coming to school to every day, was really transformational. But with that came a lot of really fascinating structures in terms of school leadership that enable that to happen and to be well structured. Because when we place, when we say to the children that it's brilliant that you don't know, we are actually placing them in a very vulnerable position emotionally, because as human beings, we find it very uncomfortable and very difficult to be in a position of not knowing. The default position is for children to want to put their hand up to know the answer, to feel really happy. So we'll uncover how all really like to share with you how one then goes about setting up the conditions in which children are able to embrace uncertainty, embrace not knowing, actually thrive with wanting to not know, because all the conditions are set in order for them to be able to succeed.
Yeah.
So that's.
Sorry, Marcelo. Actually, there's some kind of response that it's that the assumptions that a lot of teachers make that what they're teaching is new, but not actually testing that children might know it already. So it's that kind of threshold point of finding out where they don't know. And you've referred to it, and I'm going to just highlight it a bit. So you were talking in the session at the Society of Authors around your book, but actually a number of books. So the one that we were really focusing on was The Joy of Not Knowing. I'm going to hold it up here because it's on my desk in front of me. So The Joy of Not Knowing, and there are other books around that you've written to kind of unpack and books that teachers can use.
Yes, absolutely. And what was really the launch, the beginning of this kind of real excitement in making children feel enthusiastic about coming to school is that I developed what I really wanted. So I'll finish with my story to where I am now, and then we'll go on to into the concepts. But so following right to the book, which was really amazing, was over COVID time. Having that specific time to write was absolutely fabulous. I then got a position at the University of Sussex, and where I am now, an assistant professor in the Department of Education, and I teach on the primary and early years course with QTS. So it feels really special to come a sort of full circle to now be inspiring the next generation of teachers. But also, very interestingly, now also lead the Masters in Education course, which has given me that sort of real intellectual challenge and course leadership, which I'm really, really loving. And the other thing that I'm really loving, Chris, which I'd love to explore with a smart curriculum, is that I also lead the experience of the Bolshak and visiting scholars to the department every year. We have a series of people mainly from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan that come over and spend an interim time with us in the department. And that has been really, really fascinating, including various travels to Kazakhstan and to Uzbekistan, where I have been working with the government of Uzbekistan for the last 4 or 5 years in terms of using the philosophy and principles that underpin The Joy of Not Knowing to help them establish a reformed curriculum. And it's just so fascinating, Chris, how Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan place education they give it so much importance. They place it really at the heart of society. It's just so amazing, and they've been working on a reform curriculum totally grounded on critical thinking, creative thinking, philosophical thinking. So I've been doing a lot of the maths textbooks for them, and moving the presentation of the learning in the textbooks from a very kind of traditional, this is the question you must, and this is the answer, to a much more open-ended creative thinking approach with maths, which I absolutely
love. Yeah, that's
really fascinating. Yeah, so that's where I am now, which is really, 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 really wonderful. But yes, with I think the idea of the not knowing, and the idea that the principles that underpin the excitement that I have with not knowing, I think is based on my life as a scientist. Because if you think about the life of a scientist, the life of a research scientist, they, by definition, they come into the lab every day, the work every day, and they try and plan an experiment as to work out something that no one knows the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what I wanted, having that sort of training and being that as a scientist, you become very comfortable placing yourself in that position every day of trying to think of a question and then think of a method to try and solve that problem that is not known. They're not doing experiments with things that are already known. So I think that formation of being of having been formed as a scientist, and if every teacher could have that scientific formation before coming into education, I think would be so transformational. Because when I had my first wonderful lot of year 3, had 36 year 3 children at Christ in my first NQT year, 6 tables of 6. It was amazing. What I wanted was for them to every single day come into school, come into the classroom, run into the classroom, feeling and thinking like a scientist. And I think that was to feel that they were coming in and going to discover things during the day, not being told things that they were. Do you see that?
Yeah,
that's formation is like not to come in and just think today the teacher's going to tell me lots of things that I have to learn. I wanted to really change the focus and think today I'm going to come in and I'm just going to discover lots of things, which is how the EYFS children function. They come in, they get, the teachers are so amazing at providing the environment in which they can immerse themselves from the beginning to the end of the day. And they just engage in all that playful curiosity and discovery without really realizing that they're in fact doing so much learning. And that concept that we can discuss as well of taking that pedagogy or that principle further up the school is what I now call dysmetacognition. So the opposite of metacognition, thinking. In metacognition, we are really aware of thinking about what we know and how we function. And dysmetacognition is the concept I'm trying to introduce to describe how we can present the learning at all ages in a way that involves the children, the students, in a very playful and meaningful system and approach and moment where they're actually not focusing on specific things they have to learn, but they're engaging in a very playful discovery.
That's an interesting sort of concept. So it's a child comes into school expecting that the teacher knows it and they're going to reveal to them what they know. What you're describing is setting up circumstances where let's discover together, let's find a way forward. It just has resonance. I'm interested in your link with Guy Claxton and that creativity. I trained as a creative teacher. I was a design technologist. I spent 25 years teaching in that environment. And I often thought, we were presenting children with a brief, a problem, and what we were looking for was their approach to that problem and discovery and analysis and idea generation, ideation. That I can hear that in what you're saying. It's
amazing.
The playfulness of it is an interesting characteristic.
That's so amazing you say that, Chris. And I know this comes at the end, but
sorry.
In terms of the ideas to leave teachers with, but I'll say I'll touch on it now because it's exactly what you're saying. And what I love to do is which is what the book does, is just gives loads of actual practical ideas. The best way that I have found to engage, inspire, enthuse, intrinsically motivate the children right from the beginning of every lesson is to transform the learning objective. It's really simple, from a statement, which usually is to be able to learn about the properties of two-dimensional shape, for example. It's usually a statement. I have found that it's exactly what you're saying. If you transform the learning objective into a question, it totally transforms the way that the learning happens in the classroom for that lesson. And also transforming it into a can we question, because, so for example, in that example is we can say, can we investigate the properties of two-dimensional shape? So you're immediately removing that worry, because to be able to, half the class will probably say, oh, I can't, this is horrible, let's switch off. But when you phrase it around, can we investigate, can we discover the properties to the shape, or the characteristics to the shape, it becomes an altogether. And also it places, like you say, places a teacher in a position where you are open to the knowledge that all the children come with. So you're embraced. So you, by that question, you're inviting a lot of knowledge that they already have. You're, like you said at the beginning, you're seeing where the current knowledge is. And then the magical thing with this, which is what I would really love to leave people with, is that if you turn that question into a philosophical question, which is my real passion in education, bringing a philosophical approach to the teaching and learning process, then you have the most incredible experience as a teacher that you can imagine. So in that example, for example, you can launch the lesson by saying, do two-dimensional shapes exist? And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I don't believe two-dimensional shapes exist, but yet we've got names for them, we study them. All schools have a drawer which says two-dimensional shapes. And they've got flat shapes which are 3D. But when I do this a lot with children at school, go and do a lot of philosophy with them, and they go and they say, well, paper is two, I say, is anything to do? They say paper is two-dimensional because they say it's really, really thin. So there's that. And even some teachers have never thought about things in this way. So it's looking at things in a very exciting and new way. And a lot of the time, I have no idea what the answers are either, or the thinking that comes from these really funny questions. But you, through a philosophical learning objective, you really discover as a teacher exactly where their reasoning is, where their knowledge is, where the misconceptions are. It's a really, really good way of developing that. Classrooms that function as communities of inquiry, as I call it. That's the launch. That's how you live. And through answering these really funny questions, you get so much insight into where the knowledge is.
That's really fascinating, Marcelo. That idea of the learning continuum, and where, me as a teacher, where I sit on that, and where a child is. There are so many subjects that you've dealt with, and I know as a secondary school teacher, children that were further on than even where I might have been on a particular subject, and it's having that being brave enough to admit that actually you know more than I do on this. And
absolutely, absolutely. And with my background, when I started teaching, I was loving that, because I was having to teach geography and history and things, and the children knew a million times more than I did with all of those things, because I haven't grown up here, I didn't, all that sort of thing. So embracing what they know is really fantastic. At this stage with the audience, can I just shape their thinking a little bit? I was going
to because we got to that sort of halfway point. Can I just say, so what I'll do it while you're on the screen. So thank you, Marcelo, for the conversation. Please, if you're listening, I know it's early in the morning and many Many will be watching this later in the day. But if you're watching later and you want to leave a comment that we can respond to afterwards, please do so. But please do like, share, and subscribe, because it helps the message get out to others, and you can share it with other colleagues. I think what Marcelo is sharing with us is really powerful, and I think, you know, get into the Joy of Not Knowing book. But please do help us to get these conversations a little wider out there. But Marcelo, now you're gonna take us into an example of that sort of thinking. So
yes, I wanted to set the audience, the people listening or watching, a little framing of their thinking in terms of how they can then view their everyday in the classroom. And I do this with children, and it's just so amazingly wonderful, and with adults in set days and things. You know, it's just really, really powerful. So I want everyone to think, first of all, about something that they know. Okay, so anything at all that people listen, something that
I know the company name is Smart Curriculum, so that's
exactly. That's something you know that you know. Brilliant. I now want everyone to think about something that they know that they don't know. Okay, so anything at all that you know that you don't know.
I don't know the year of your birth. You've told us where you were born, but I don't know.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So you know you don't know what year I was born. Absolutely brilliant. And then the third one, which is the really fascinating one, is to think about something that you know that no one in the world knows, that's not known.
That takes a little more thinking.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah.
But that's the scientist, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the scientist. That's all the things that we in the world still don't know. I'm trying to solve problems towards, you know, trying to find solutions. And what's really interesting about those three facets of education is that I'm fascinated by the concept that was introduced to me, and we did so much work together with John West Burnham unfortunately died a couple of years ago, but we were about to write a book together called From Knowledge to Understanding to Wisdom. And we always, and those three, the reason why I set those questions is because they describe extremely well that idea that education should, for me, be based on the idea that it's the acquisition of knowledge is just the first step. And what's really, really important is to then give the children, give the students the opportunity to give meaning to understand, to master, to play with that knowledge, to really understand what that knowledge means, rather than, you know, as very much I remember in my primary school, my formative education in Argentina was all about learning by heart, learning by memory, getting ticks, but not really understanding. You know, I love maths and I was brilliant at maths and in Buenos Aires, but I realized when I came over here that I had no idea what I was doing. I could get all the answers correct, but I had no idea what, you know, I didn't have that mathematical master understanding. And then for me, the magic then comes in then once you have the understanding, developing the wisdom which enables a person to use that understanding for the good of society, for the benefit of the society, for being able to solve problems that we need to solve, for making the world a better place. So going from knowledge to understanding to wisdom is those three questions. So the first one, when you said you know that your company is called the Smart Curriculum, that's your knowledge. You've got that. You haven't learned anything new as a result of me asking you a question, but it made you feel good, didn't it? Because you knew the answer, and so you feel good. But when the Joy of Not Knowing is based on the principle of the pit, which was introduced to me by James Nottingham at those magical moments in the early 2000s when I was meeting so many people. And the idea is that if you think you're positioning yourself at the top of left-hand side of the pit, and the teacher asks a question, if you know the answer, you can jump across. If you don't know the answer, the idea is that you go into the pit, you do all your working out, you find out your problem solve, and then when you get the answer, you climb out. And when I do this, it's amazing to do this visually. And if anyone's watching and would like an interaction with other inset days or with children, it's just so magical. I love. There's nothing I love doing more than going to schools and actually demonstrating.
Actually, Marcelo, I saw the video where you were lecturing on it. I think we'll put the link to the YouTube video where you actually do this with some teachers.
Yes, we do it live. It's so transformative. It really changes the life of children so much, because the idea is that the child that so I asked them, where were they born? So I bring two children to the top of the pit. One, I ask them a question I know they will know the answer to. One, I'll ask them a question I know they don't know the answer to. So the one that knows the answer is really happy, jumps across. The one that doesn't know the answer is a little bit worried, anxious. But interestingly, before I ask the questions, they're both really anxious. So because they don't know what's going to happen. And I always say to, when I do this with teachers, I always say to them, this is the anxiety that the teachers, when I model it with teachers, and there's teachers doing this, and they feeling really anxious and they're feeling really worried because they don't know what's going to happen and they're in an awkward position. I'm saying, if you think that's how the children are feeling when we launch our lessons, it's really interesting to think that a lot of them are going through that kind of worry and anxiety as we launch into the learning. So the idea of this is to remove all that and to change that position into one of excitement and enthusiasm. So the one that goes into the pit, works things out, and comes out again, and the one that's jumped, both start and end in the same positions. It's really interesting. I don't know if you can see it visually, but both start at one end and finish at the other end of the pit. But they finish as incredibly different learners. And this is where the transformation comes, because the one that jumped across, but was really happy that they jumped across, when I say to them, have you learned anything new? They then say, no, because I already knew it. And then when I say to the other one, going through the process of the pit, are you now in this position, having learned something new? Say yes. So it really demonstrates that in order to learn something new, we have to not know it first. It's such a simple process, but it's really interesting, because also it helps to demonstrate so many aspects, because the person that's gone through the pit and has ended up at the end, they've ended up as a very different learner compared to the one that knew the answer and is in the same place, because by having new knowledge, they now have more questions, more curiosity. So usually I say, where was I born? No one, people don't know. We then work it out. And then they have loads of questions, do I speak Spanish? What's it like to live in Argentina? So the person that knew the answer and jumped across doesn't have any more questions anymore. So it really demonstrates so many aspects of the process. But the key to all of this, which is really, really exciting, is that when you place the child in a position of not knowing, and by definition, teachers are doing that to all the children all the time, because the idea of teaching is to share with them something that they don't yet know, teach them something new. So you have a class that is all in that position at the top of the pit, not knowing the answer. And the interesting thing is that when we, as human beings, when we're in a position of not knowing, we have the choice, don't we? We can either want to know it, or we're not interested in knowing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, you know that you don't know when I was born. You might be interested in knowing that, or you might not be interested in knowing that at all. You know, you have a choice of wanting to.
Yeah.
So the key to education, I feel, is to get, once we've got the children in a position of not knowing, is to get them to feel intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically, but intrinsically motivated to want to know what they know that they don't know.
That's really interesting, because so many people are talking about the knowledge, the knowledge curriculum, knowledge content, but actually this isn't the antithesis of that. This is actually the fascination of learning, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because I don't know, and I'm interested, and that to me is what comes out of it. It's
and they're interested because they see meaning in it for themselves. They see, and that initial conversation that you have through the philosophical learning objective all contributes to this, because it means that you're placing the learning within the context of the real world, of real life, of discussion. So everyone sees a value in that. But there's a very, very important key point, because which is what I call making children feel comfortable with being uncomfortable. So we place them by definition in a position of uncomfort by saying to them, today we're going to learn something new, which is what education is. So actually sharing with the children that that's an uncomfortable position to be emotionally is really interesting. But then to make them feel comfortable with that uncomfort is the key to success. And the way that happens, which is so much part of what makes up the book, is what happens inside the pit. When you go into that time when you're doing the problem solving, you're asking questions, you're working with others, you're using all the dispositions of an effective learner, everything that you can use to problem solve, that's where it happens. And what that does is if the children feel equipped when they are in the pit with all the tools, dispositions, and skills that enables them to thrive, then they will want to go into the learning process as well. So that choice becomes an intrinsic motivational choice to the positive, to wanting to know, because they feel that once they are then having to work things out, they have everything they need to be able to do so. And what that creates are children who then know how to know. So in the pit, they know how to know what they want to know that they know they don't know. Yeah. So
you're giving them tools to get out of the pit. So they understand that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating is that unless they feel able to, unless you feel equipped, if you're going to do a DIY job, unless you feel you've got your toolbox of kits and you know how to do what you're trying to do, you're not going to start, are you? You're not going to even have a go at trying to fix something if you don't have the right tools, if you don't know how to go about doing it. So with that comes a really, really, really interesting concept, because how do we make sure that right from the beginning, children, students are feeling able to thrive and feeling that they have everything that they need? Well, I thought that it'd be really interesting to make that really explicit. So I developed the concept, Chris, of what's called a Learning to Learn week.
Yes.
So what I argue for that all schools should be doing, and in my response to the assessment review and the curriculum, I really fought for this, is that all schools should devote the first week of the academic year to what I call a Learning to Learn week. And you'll see that chapters 5 and 6 describe absolute transformational, magical experience that leads to when you spend nominally 5 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not talking about the curriculum at all, but just equipping the children with all the skills, dispositions, values, learning environments, setting up learning environments that will enable them to feel that they can thrive and feel that they can succeed. Whether they do or not during the year is, for me, is immaterial. And a lot of the time I'd be expecting them not to succeed, because if you place things difficult, with enough difficulty, the idea is that they, it's not easy for them, so they're not succeeding all the time, but they are having a go. They're really enthusiastic to be trying, to be working things out, to seeing what needs improving to get it right next to, all that process. But so that way enables the environment in the classroom to be constructed mutually with the children, so co-constructing that learning environment, and also giving them all the tools that it's going to excite them, and strategies and skills and dispositions going to excite them to feel that they're able to thrive with whatever comes during the year.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting because on the first day, the Monday, they all the children construct their own personal model of learning. And that is so transformational, because when a child describes how they view learning as a model on day one, and it could be anything at all, some children say it's like, for me, learning is like going to a maze. I go in, I don't know where the exit is, I get stuck, sometimes I have to go back again, and eventually I find my way out, and that's when I've learned. And imagine, again, another brilliant takeaway for any teachers listening. If you do this with your class, at the end of the first day with them, all the children have drawn, described, and illustrated their model of learning, and everyone is unique to every child. And they're all then displayed before they go home on day one on the wall. So they go home feeling equally valued as a learner and as an individual. And then the teacher uses their model of learning throughout the year to refer to them, to have those feedback conversations, to say, whereabouts in the maze are you? So that you use their language to have those conversations, which is really, really fantastic. Then they also introduce to the junk pit of the model from day one. And when you do this with reception and nursery children, and they live it, they walk through it, it's so incredible for the rest of their lives, that sense. When I was the head of Hartfield Infants and all this was happening, whenever I was showing parents around and I was letting them chat with the children and everything, they would come back at the end of the tour of the school and they say, Marcelo, this is a really lovely school, but there's something that really worries us, because every class we go into, every child we talk to, they say they love not knowing here.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to then have those discussions with the parents. But yes, then day two looks at creative thinking, and that's where things like welcoming them, like you were saying, this is Start Thinking book that I created with the children. And
that's lots of exercises and examples.
Yeah, so these are, so for anyone that can see the screen, so children have their thinking skills books, and every morning there's a challenge waiting for them as they come into the classroom, which is an open-ended challenge, and that all children can succeed with. And they have their thinking skills books in which they do their thinking in, which are never marked. So there's no pressure, no worries, no anxiety with those, whilst we're taking the register. And they also come in, and I used to, I think it's brilliant to have, I was supposed to have classical music in the background. They come in, they're doing their thinking, and I would take the register in Spanish. So they're getting language, thinking, and music, within the first few minutes. And that sense of excitement of wanting to come in was absolutely amazing.
That degree of intentionality is I love that. That's the first time I've heard you say that. That the kind of changing and challenging their thinking. I've talked to lots of schools about language development and lots of techniques. The language lesson is almost the antithesis of kind of how you would learn language, but it's that immersion that you talk about, that journey of coming into England, speaking Spanish, and how you learned that. It's that intentionality is really different, isn't it?
So much. Yes, so much. And with that, there's another chapter 11 finishes touches on the concept that I described called multilingual thinking in multicultural classrooms. Because and it really links to not knowing, because when I came to England, for example, and I think that's where it stems from, I couldn't engage with the curriculum for the first 6 months or so with any of the curriculum, not because I didn't know how to do it sort of cognitively, but it's because I didn't know what it meant, because I didn't know the English. So my not knowing was not knowing the language of instruction, rather not knowing what the task was. I could have done it in Spanish. So what I've developed now, which I would love, I love teachers for experimenting with this, is to enable all children to use the whole wealth of culture and language that they bring with them into the classroom every day to access the curriculum. So I really, I think it's really fascinating to enable children to engage in normal lessons and using a mixed, what I call that sort of that translanguaging, and give them the opportunity to engage with everything that they have with them, rather than language of instruction being an obstacle. And that's really, really interesting as well, because of the heart. Because if you engage the child with their heritage language, like Nelson Mandela says, if you talk to them with their own language, it goes to their heart. If you talk to the language, actually, it goes to their head. And even now, if I'm writing poetry, I would write it in Spanish, even now. So that sense of making a child feel that they are engaging with the learning from an emotional point of view very much involves enabling them and allowing them to use their home language. So so these are amazing. But then if we're talking about the wonders of not knowing, I believe, Chris, that children are born philosophical. They're born wondering. They're born inquiring. They're born wanting to know. They're born not knowing, aren't they? And then trying to find out. So the children in reception, and again, if you're looking at, if you can see it, this is a little book.
Yeah, we can see that. Yep. So this is an exercise book.
Yeah, it's called the children themselves in reception said, they said, Mr. S, you always come in and ask us lots of philosophical questions, but we have lots of questions too. So they said, can we start our own books? They developed these why books. There's a 4-year-olds coming in every morning as they come in, getting their white books out and writing their philosophical questions down.
And then get an opportunity to ask them. So and then we would use them in philosophical discussions. How is water made, for example? I'm just looking at this one. And then the teacher in the philosophical discussions based on their questions would write the contributions of the class. So it would capture for the significant achievements of those children, orally and cognitively. There would be the teacher and the adults would capture through the discussions that we were having, based on their philosophical questions, significant moments in their development, which is a huge part of the EYFS. So there's a lot of the child-centered teaching, teacher-centered teaching idea, but that respecting that a child's brain is working and there's things that they're asking and there's a world that they're looking at, just that opportunity to stop and say, well, what are you thinking on this?
Yes.
how does that's giving child agency, that's growing that kind of understanding of their world and what you're able to speak. Some people talk about they're taking the temperature of the room, and that's just what's happening. It's fascinating. So the exercise books you use, the when, how, and who, or sorry, when, why, and who.
Yes.
You encourage them to sort of free form questions as they go through the.
Yes. So they call they're called why books. So the older ones have the Think in Schools books where they do a challenge that I put on the board or the teacher puts on the board.
Yep.
The why books are the opposite. They are for reception and nursery, and they are books that the children write their own philosophical questions that they come in with to school every morning.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share with the audience as well, because I'm really interested in the link between the child, the school, and the family. So when these starters were working so well, and we published it, we Start Thinking with all the children's ideas, I thought that it would be really interesting to also engage the families in this excitement in the morning. So I developed the concept of the thinking blackboard in the playground. Because I noticed when I was at Harvard, I noticed I had 200 families captive in my playground before school started for about 10-15 minutes. And I thought this is a brilliant opportunity to get them all to think together as well, and to feel that excitement of being at school, coming to school. So I turned one of the sheds that we have into a blackboard, and every morning I put a question up, a philosophical question or challenge. And it was so incredible. The children would run in and leave chalk out there, and then the families would all contribute to it together. And very often families were saying, this is the only time we get out of our incredibly busy lives at home to enjoy thinking together, being together, working together, learning to, and it was so amazing to start the day in that way and involve everyone. But also it gave us the opportunity to bring the world into the school and our school out into the world.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I was, this is a really moving story, because when I was head at Hartford, it was coincided with the time that the Chilean miners got stuck in the mine. Do you remember?
Oh yes, yes,
and
absolutely.
then the day when, do you remember? They were all released.
Yep, escape.
Rescued, not released. Rescued, one at a time with the lift. That day, I put on the board messages to the miners, and obviously, being Argentina and Chile is, very, very close to us, to our hearts. And every family, in their own language, wrote a message to the miners, which we then sent.
Yep.
With a financial contribution as well that we raised funds for. It was so incredible, so simple, but that sense of our school. In a very deprived area of Brighton, doing just so incredible with the outside world. So a thinking blackboard, thinking in playgrounds is called. Creating a blackboard is so easy and so incredibly transformational. Yeah,
Marcelo, you captured so much, and we've got to kind of a minute left, and our planning. I've left you to sort of talk us through it, because it's so powerful. I've said so many times then the concentration on this kind of examination end of secondary education. We are not looking enough at EYFS and reception years, because the foundations are laid, and what you're describing is setting children up for a learning journey in a way that's, I still am astounded when I go and I'm working with leadership teams and, leaders of schools that saying, well, I don't do maths. I'm not confident with maths, and I can't, please don't, let's not get into finances and numbers and structures, because it's complex. But actually that level of inquisitiveness and what you're describing of kind of, the thinking about cognition, how do I approach these things, would be so important if we started differently, and how we set that confidence and learning up in a different way. Look, it's been a rich conversation. And I'd love if you would, Marcelo, come back and let's talk about some of the chapters you referred to, the multilingual classroom and how our teachers can deal with that, because that's a current big issue for people. Maybe we can sort of, we've introduced the whole idea.
Yes.
And we've not gone enough into the metacognition that you would. I'd like to come to that.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll leave you with one tiny little example, Chris. So you just mentioned maths. Look at this. This is a starter called the 4 Force Challenge. Just a little example of what can happen. Look at this. The children have to use 4 fours to make every number. So 4 add 4 divided by 4 add 4 uses 4, 4 makes 1. Okay, so that's 4 divided by 4, add 4 divided by 4, 1 add 1 makes 2, and so on. A little challenge as a starter. These children in year 5 went to each other's, 4 of them went to one child's house and brought this incredible thing in the next day. They'd worked every single number to 150.
So those that are listening, it's a big board that's covered with sums that end up with a different number. So using 4 in lots of different combinations.
Exactly, and then using lots of mathematical operations. So 4 squares, square root of 4, 4 factorial, 4 to the power of 0. But they were playing, 4 factorial, 4 times 3 times 2. They are playing, and their intrinsic enthusiasm to want to do this. It was just a Saturday morning. I didn't say, now you have to carry on. It was just, and when you mention that, the love of maths and the use of maths and the way that maths can become so wonderfully playful, it's just, there's no better example than this to present. It's just how we present it and how we enable that freedom to arise.
So if I ask you the standard question that we ask, if there's one impact you could make or one change that you'd like to see, what would it be, Marcelo?
Can I have 2?
I'll let you.
Well, one of them I think is schools launching with a Learning to Learn week, and then it becomes totally bespoke to the school. So every school, the idea of the week is there, but then every school context, including every year within every school, looks different. But that sort of launch with that would to really, really transform the culture and the classroom, and the way the children feel about themselves and as learners, I think is so amazing. And the other one is to play around with the learning objective. I would say that's very, very easy to create something that's so kind of transformational in terms of the enthusiasm with which children then approach or engage with which is of the lessons. And the third one is to tell the children that it's brilliant, to tell them all how brilliant it is to not know.
I think, well, look, get the book, because The Joy of Not Knowing is not about celebrating unintelligence. It's about recognizing the start point and the fascination of that next step. Marcelo, we are going to get you back to talk about some of those things. If you would, that would be a real pleasure.
I'd love to.
But just there's so much in this about the joy of learning, and that's what this is all about. Yeah. Please stay with me, Marcelo, for a minute. I'm going to do the end part. So just let me conclude. That was a wonderful conversation, and thank you to Marcelo for facilitating such a fascinating subject. We 2 weeks time we are going to be diving into another part of education, so please come and enjoy the conversation. I know we've had a summer where the recorded conversations rather than live conversations, and we're getting back into live conversations as the term pursues. So please, if you're with us or you want to leave comments or you want more information on the journey, I think this is such an important subject about really concentrating on early years and the start points of that learning journey. So I'm really grateful to Marcelo and others that have spoken on various different aspects of that journey. And if you go back and look at some of the deep dives over the summer on IT, on cybersecurity as it relates to young children, and the concentration that we have. Please do get into those conversations. But thank you for being with us this morning. 2 weeks' time, we're coming back. We are looking at introducing some other premium content as we move into this new academic year. But thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in a fortnight's time.